Well, losing a series to the Pirates the way that the Cardinals did is not what you want to see given the upcoming schedule for this homestand. What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of b-schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer, it is Thursday, April 10th, 2025. Cardinals have the off day today, so we'll talk a little bit about yesterday's game gone wrong for St. Louis, the base running blunders, wasting the masterful pitching performance by Eric Fetty, and really most of the relievers out of the Cardinal pen did a nice job too. But the Cardinals soiled it by not being able to put up runs against the Pittsburgh Pirates. And now you have a homestand coming up on Friday. It begins with the Phillies in town. That is not going to get any easier from a scheduling perspective for the Cardinals. When you face the Pirates, that's a series that you really want to win, especially when the next games up on your ledger include contests against the Phillies and the Astros before you go back out on the road for another tough road trip in the New York Mets and the Atlanta Braves. It's a tough month of April for the Cardinals, and it would have been nice to find their second series win of the season when they faced Pittsburgh in the midweek here, and they come up short. 2-1 losers on Wednesday. The Paul Skeens game was great, but it was the only time the Cardinals got a win in that series, and you just look at the standings and the record for the Cardinals since that opening sweep of the Minnesota Twins, and it's been rather bleak. You dropped 2 of 3 against the Angels at home, swept at Boston, and then another losing effort against Pittsburgh. That's 3 series with a combined 2 wins for the Cardinals. That's all they've been able to muster. So they're 2-7 in their last 9 games, 5-7 on the season. It would feel so much different to be able to say 6-6, got back to even Steven before this upcoming homestand. But they couldn't figure out a way to win a game on Wednesday that was extremely winnable. It was right there for the taking for the Cardinals, and they simply couldn't come up with the key moments in that game. I want to talk about a few different spots in Wednesday's game before we look ahead at the series upcoming against the Philadelphia Phillies. It was base running, really, that cost the Cardinals. You're not going to have a great offensive performance every day. It's just not going to be sustainable over the course of a season, even for the best offenses. That's illustrated by the point that the Cardinals over their first 11 games, I think we talked about this yesterday, had approached the National League record for the number of times in a row to begin a season that they scored 4 or more runs. The Cardinals did it in their first 11 games. I think 12 would have tied the National League record, which is to say that steady drumbeat of consistency, as much as we talk about it being what you strive for, it's easier said than done. Teams over the course of 2 weeks are probably going to have at least one of those games where they sputter offensively. But for it to come on the same day for the Cardinals, for the first time of the season, in the 12th game of the year, the same game where they had probably their best collective pitching performance so far in 2025, well, that's a real bummer. Because what had the storyline been prior to? Well, the Cardinals' pitching has not been consistent enough. And then over the course of 13 innings, you get a starter who doesn't give up any hits, and then a whole host of relievers who come in and by and large do their jobs. That's a shame to waste, because you had every opportunity as a result of that quality pitching to win the game. Talk about the base running. I'll get into a little bit of my thoughts on the pitching too, because I'm curious to see if the Cardinals decide to make any roster moves before Friday's game and that homestand kicks off when it comes to the bullpen specifically. And we're coming up on that period where they had talked about a 6-man rotation beginning. We're about a week away from that, so we'll see if that timeline is one that sticks or not. And maybe you got a hint from Wednesday's game that the Cardinals are potentially considering alternatives to that. So we'll get into that, but let's start with the base running. A couple of key plays stand out from this one. Thomas Saggese in I believe it was the top of the 8th inning, failing to score on the pop-up at home plate by Wilson Contreras, which was Contreras' only hit of the game. He went 1 for 6, still searching, still trying to find it at the plate, and whether or not a lineup move is something that could help him or is really irrelevant to the outcome, he's just going to have to find his way through this slump. That was his only hit on Wednesday, and it didn't come as an RBI because Thomas Saggese wasn't able to score from third base. It was a very bizarre play. I do not envy Saggese in that spot because it was difficult. You respect what might have been going through his head regarding, hey, don't get myself hurt, don't get somebody else hurt, don't have an unnecessary collision. But it was a very passive sort of play, I thought, by Thomas Saggese, which is is just what it is sometimes, right? Like you're in a moment like that, a moment you don't expect to be in. I don't want to be too terribly hard on him because I have respect for the unique nature of that play. But you'd like to think that a little bit of that baseball instinct would kick in and just say, what do I got to do to score this run? Because we're on a getaway day. We haven't been playing our best baseball recently. We want to get to a 500 record. We got to score this run. We want to reward Eric Fetty and the pitching staff for the job that they're doing today. It was a weird play, but as it plays out, the two Pirates collide basically right there on top of the third base chalk, on top of the baseline, and the ball squirts out. What exactly Thomas Saggese saw as this was unfolding, I think, is another aspect of this that we should at least be cognizant of, because he didn't have the angle that we all had watching it on television, right? He was out there living it, and he may have, if I had to guess, I suspect that he was screened by the two fielders that he was trying to avoid colliding with and figure out, what the circumstances were. But it's 2 outs in the inning, so if it's caught, you figure it doesn't really make any difference. You might as well just keep trucking, just keep running. I think for a moment he wasn't sure whether it was caught, wasn't caught, or if it wasn't, where the ball actually had gone. And he's trying to kind of carefully navigate around the tangle of bodies, like, excuse me, very Midwestern of him, going to slide right past you. It just so happens, though, that the direction, if you're going to go around toward the left of the tangle of bodies or around the right side of the tangle of bodies, if the choice is not to just go right through the bodies, which we'll talk about in a minute. If you're going to go left, unfortunately, that's also where the ball is, and that's where a very heads-up former Gold Glove third baseman Cabrian Hayes is, and he picks up the ball and reaches out to tag Saggese before he can tag home plate. So the Cardinals really didn't deserve a run in that situation, but when the Pirates are playing as poorly fundamentally as they were, and that was an example of it, you just have to take advantage of that. You have to be the team with the killer instinct, and I would say whatever Saggese did, while understandable to an extent because it is a bizarre play, killer instinct is the last 2 words in the English language that would come to mind to describe the way that he handled that play. And again, I'm not even saying that. It is a little bit of a criticism, but it's also acknowledging the difficulty of the circumstance. I think if anything else, you'd like him to be a little bit more strategic. Like, killer instinct would be just keep running, and if you step on them, you step on them, and if they get hurt, that's not really what I'm suggesting. But you have to invite a little bit of contact. You have to basically do like a basketball player flopping on a foul call in hoops, because in this instance, it wouldn't be a flop. It would be, what do they say in Toy Story? It's not, you're not flying, you're falling with style. You kind of have to fall with style a little bit, because you don't want to get yourself hurt. You want to make sure you're landing, not twisting an ankle, twisting a knee, doing something detrimental when you've got some uncertain terrain in front of you. But you have to make physical contact with one of those players because they're right in your baseline, and the path to home plate goes through those two dudes. So Thomas Saggese, if nothing else, has to kind of take a little contact. Again, and it's on the fly. It's happening in real time, so it's easy to sit back here and say, here's what he should have done, which is normally something I hate to do because I always try to respect the difficulty of what these players and even the coaches and the managers are doing in game. It happens in a split moment. You have to make a decision. But that's why these guys are professionals, right? That's why they're doing it at the highest level, so it's okay to hold them to a little bit of a higher standard. And in this situation, I would like to have thought for Saggese to kind of have a little bit of contact to at least be able to appeal to the umpires. Like, even if you run into those guys, you kind of stumble into them, fall down, pretend to trip, whatever, you make it clear, like, this was my path to home plate, and they physically were blocking it, and they obstructed me. You have to give the umpires the leverage to call obstruction. Alan Craig, circa 2013, like, you have to put the umpires in the position to make that call, and they didn't. I believe I saw from one of the reporters that was there in Pittsburgh state after the fact that Oliver Marmol did ask for the obstruction to be looked at, and it is not a reviewable play in terms of obstruction. It wasn't quite to the level of blocking home plate. Like, if a catcher is blocking the path to home plate, that was not the jurisdiction I think that we were in, because you were still technically in the middle of the baseline. It wasn't in the home plate arena just yet. So I think Saggese just had to invite some contact, and he didn't do it. And that's why there was no call, and I think the umpires probably got it right, because they're looking and saying, look, I mean, he went around him. Right? Like, what am I to do? He continued to try to go toward home plate just because it looked really clunky and it was obviously ineffective and the wrong choice if the goal was to score the run. What are the umpires going to do? They understand probably why he went around him, but he kind of did the passive route and made the job of the umpires, I guess, easier because they didn't have to deal with whether or not to make a game-changing obstruction call. It was out of their hands at that point because no obstruction happened. No physical contact happened. So that was tough. It unequivocally cost the Cardinals a run. You should be able to score in that spot. I understand, though, because of the uniqueness of the play, that it's a tough one. What wasn't a tough one was the 10th inning play involving Tommy Pham, Michael Ciani, and unfortunately, at the center of this thing is Pop Warner. He's the third base coach, and he was responsible, in my opinion, for the Cardinals failing to score a run in that spot, and ultimately, you could say that one probably cost them the game, too. It was a base hit to left field. There's nobody out in the top of the 10th inning, and now remember, if you're in extra innings, you know that one run isn't always enough to win you the game if you're the road team. Now, they, of course, ended up playing until the 13th inning, and those first 2 innings, nobody scored. The 12th inning, each team scored 1, and then the Cardinals didn't score in the 13th. The Pirates did to walk it off. But generally speaking, as the road team, you can't, and this is part of the reason, too, when people say, well, why don't they bunt somebody to third base? Why don't they do X, Y, Z? You're not going to bunt somebody over, especially on the road. I mean, only on the road. If you're at home and you know the other team didn't score and you only need one, by all means, bunt somebody over. On the road, you can't necessarily do that because selling out for one run when the other team starts with a guy in scoring position is just strategically not something that makes sense. You have to try to do your level best to put up a crooked number. Base hit gives the Cardinals a really good situation. They'd had first and third, nobody out. Even in that situation, a double play ball scores a run, so at least you get the requisite one that you need to ostensibly extend the game, even if you don't win the game, right? That's how it worked in the 12th inning. Steven Matz did a nice job, but ended up allowing that automatic base runner to score, so the game went to the 13th inning. But at least you're even Steven on that inning. You're not losing the game there. So first and third, nobody out is a really good situation. What's not a good situation is base hit to left field turning into an out, and no longer do you have that runner in scoring position at third base. I just don't really understand the decision. I don't think there was any justification for sending Michael Ciani in that situation by Pop Warner. First of all, you have the context of who the fielder is. It's Tommy Pham. You're very familiar with Tommy Pham. He was on your team literally last season. You know what he can do. He's a good arm out there in left. And it was very, very shallow. I mean, he was charging hard on the base hit. It was not a particularly difficult throw for him to make. Yes, again, we talk about the balance between being smart and conservative and then being aggressive when you're trying to force the fielder to make a great play. I think he just had to make a standard play in this spot. And the expectation for me would be that from that position on the field, he can do it, especially when, and I credit Brad Thompson for pointing this out right away. He said that, Tommy Pham had the ball. Ciani wasn't even at third base, which the replay angles that they put together, I know the road broadcast had a better replay where it kind of showed the angle of exactly where Ciani was in relation to when Pham picked up the ball. If he's not at third base, as shallow as Pham was in left field, there's just no way that he should be sent in that situation when one run doesn't even necessarily win you the game. If it's a situation where it's the bottom of the inning and that run wins it, then it's kind of the Brendan Donovan spot from last week when people were upset that they didn't run him on Mike Trout, which, we went back and forth on that. But at least in that situation, you understand the impetus, like one guy make a play or the game is over and we win. That wasn't the situation here. And the risk reward was not in alignment to me with that decision. And even if it was a case where that was the situation and it's the bottom of the inning, the other circumstances in a vacuum, I just don't think even if it's your best runner, which in Michael Ciani's case, he's one of the Cardinals' fastest runners, I still don't see that being a savvy move. And I don't know what was said about it after the game, if Oliver Marmol agreed that it wasn't a very good send, or if he didn't want to, blame the coach. But I will say that one does unfortunately fall right on the shoulders of Pop Warner. It just can't happen. And it is kind of one of those things where third base coaches, it falls into the category of you had one job, right? Just don't get your runners into big trouble. Teams can benefit from an aggressive third base coach that knows when to push the right buttons and has a feel for that. And I don't know that Pop Warner has been value added in that role. I'm not saying there aren't other things that he does on the coaching staff that are very valuable. I'm sure that there are. But the specifics of that job is very kind of binary. Like, send the guy when they need to be sent, and when it's too big of a risk, you gotta keep it in your pocket. But he was waving him around. He had the windmill going. And I just think that was a situation where it was the risk reward quotient was not there for the Cardinals to be doing that with Siani or anybody else. I mean, if Siani can't score on that play, there's probably nobody that could, and that has to be 100%. It's a good call if you're doing it, and because of the situation, running the Cardinals out of an inning essentially. Like, they still had 2 outs to work with, but you lose the benefit of that first and third, nobody out. A lot of ways to score 1 run, and even, a number of ways to score multiple runs if you have that situation, and selling out for that 1 run just wasn't the play to me. So it is what it is. I did find it costly. I'm not going to mince words and say it was the worst send that I can remember. Again, and people got upset with me yesterday when I made a silly tweet, and me and the cat going back and forth, which is all in fun. That's just us kind of going back and forth. But people who are like, well, it wasn't that ugly of a loss. How could you say this was the ugliest loss on Mount Ugly or whatever I said? First of all, it's just a tweet. Like, it's not that serious. But my point was, like, it was an ugly game. It was a situation where the Cardinals were playing a team that we considered lesser, right? The Pirates are going to be one of the worst teams in the Central, even if they're improved, having a guy like Skeens on their roster. They're still not a really great team, and you're coming up against some really good teams very soon in the Phillies and Astros and Mets over the next 3 series, where it's like you don't want to be digging yourself a hole. And it's a getaway day. The Pirates were ready to give you that game. They were eager to give that game away, and the Cardinals didn't find a way to take it. So the number of ways that they could have won, yeah, it doesn't mean it's, that it's a worse loss than if you had a gut-wrenching loss in the playoffs. Or some people were saying, well, Sunday's loss, they lost 18-7. That's uglier. Yeah, but they never had a chance to win that game. This game, they had 2, 3, 4 different ways they could have and should have won it, and they didn't take any of them. And so that would be the reason I would classify this one as being pretty ugly. The pitching was really good. That's another reason that it's ugly, because you had every which avenue imaginable to win the game. Your starter gives up no hits. The guys coming out of the bullpen, one after another, do a really nice job and set you up favorably. I mean, Phil Maton, an inning of work, 2 strikeouts. Leahy, inning of work, 2 strikeouts. Fernandez, that's a big arm to be able to get back on the right side of the swing of things. If you're Ryan Fernandez, an inning did give up a hit, but 2 strikeouts, and the key number for him is the goose egg in the walks column, because you got to trust that when he's going out there, he's not going to give bases away for free. And he needs to be somebody that settles into a 7th, 8th inning role for this team. So that was really, really encouraging to see in a key spot. That was the 9th inning, I believe, that he pitched. Romero was good in the 10th. He walked somebody, but that's a little different. It's strategic when you get into extra innings and you put a first and second instead of a runner on second. You're trying to, have an out at any base, be able to play for the double play. Ryan Helsley navigated his inning very successfully. No, there was not an expectation that I had that he should have gone out for a second inning, because, again, the way that it has worked since the beginning of 2024 for Ryan Helsley, he's going to be able to be a guy that pitches the 9th inning, pitches in save situations, or when you're tied in the 9th inning in a home game where you're hoping to be able to walk it off in the bottom half. In this situation, they didn't use him tied in the 9th inning on the road, because you typically are waiting for that save opportunity if you can find it. And in a road situation, it is possible to then score in the top half of the inning and let him try to close it out. So that was handled appropriately, in my opinion. Saved him, even one pitcher deeper than you otherwise needed to. Romero was the guy that they went to first, and that's probably just whoever was up in the lineup and different matchup-related things. Had Helsley held for the 11th and was able to get through an 11th inning without giving up the run. Cardinals couldn't get him that win. Cardinals couldn't get the save when it was Steven Matz in the 12th, just because that ghost man scores. The guy on second base was able to come around to score on the one hit that Matz gave up. Not an earned run, but it is a run scored that extended the game, and that was the one that wasted the Jordan Walker base hit. But that's, again, one hit automatically basically sending a run home is the name of the game in extra innings, and so it's why the margins are thinner, and it's why it's really difficult of an assignment to do. The fact that Romero and Helsley both did the assignment well, you're traveling deeper into your bullpen. Steven Matz, it is interesting that they ended up throwing him on a back-to-back when about a week from now, he's supposed to be back in the rotation. We'll see what ends up happening with that. I've talked about why I don't think it works to have a six-man rotation for this team because I don't know that they have the coverage in the bullpen. If you take Matz as a relief option away, and he's a guy that can give you multiple innings on a day where your starter doesn't go very deep, you take that away, I don't know how those 7 guys are covering the day-to-day in the Cardinal bullpen. So what that leads us to is a little bit of a runway here this week where the Cardinals will figure out how do we align this bullpen, how do we construct it to give us the most coverage on the most days possible, and then see if we're able to unveil this 6-man rotation deal or if there needs to be a change of plans. And according to a report, as I'm recording this, I'm seeing this from Katie Wu, the Cardinals are optioning Chris Roycroft to Memphis on Thursday, which I've talked about on various shows the last couple of days on KTGR and Sports Hub STL. Like, I was pretty sure they were going to send him to Memphis. Like, it just is one of those deals where you can't afford to have a guy searching for command to the extent that he has been. 4 walks over his last 2 games, 6 walks in 5 2/3 innings on the season. He's got good stuff. Chris Roycroft is capable. He's a raw arm still. The Cardinals, I think, were hoping to see more of a step forward in the consistency department from him to make him be one of those guys that fits into the 7th or 8th inning opportunity bucket. It obviously has not happened because of the walks, and so he's going to go work on command in Memphis, which is always kind of a tricky subject because they have a different strike zone down there. But honing his pitches, finding a way to be more consistent with them, figuring out what's going on with that sinker. It just hasn't been kind of the same in recent days. So I think this was inevitable. I'm not seeing necessarily who they are looking to bring up. I'm sure that will come, and maybe it will as I finish recording this. But Roycroft to Memphis, so now you bring somebody back in. My thought is maybe the only way it's even conceivable to do a 6-man rotation with only 7 relievers would be if Gordon Graceffo is one of those guys. He kind of takes the Roycroft roster spot, but assumes the role of Steven Matz where he can go longer. Kyle Leahy has been really darn good as well. Exactly what that could mean if the Cardinals, would consider, I don't know. He was in a 1-inning role yesterday. He's got a 1.17 ERA, and I got a mea culpa this thing. If you told me 2 years ago when Leahy got just a cup of coffee in 2023 later in the year and just couldn't get anybody out, that he was going to be at the beginning of 2025 through a couple of weeks looking like one of the best pitchers on the Cardinal team, I would have told you there's no way. So really credit to him for putting in the work and turning himself into a guy right now who is a weapon. It just doesn't seem like he's a guy that you fit into that late inning model, but if he continues to pitch the way that he pitches, results are all that really matters. I don't really care about anything other than the results at the end of the day, and I don't think the Cardinals and Oliver Marmol do either. So he's in that circle of trust more and more, and for good reason. So we'll see the way that they try to construct that, gang. I just don't know, even with a Graceffo coming in and maybe he's able to give you 3 innings, 4 innings at a time. The real key to this is, and I think it's going to be instructive in how the Cardinals make a decision on the upcoming rotation swap or shuffle or whatever, adding in Steven Matz to the group. What do the starters do over the weekend against Philly? Because if you have a group of starters that are doing like they did against the Red Sox, where Fetty goes only a few innings, Mikolas only goes a few innings, and you're getting knocked out of games real early, you're going to look at that and say, if this happened in a 6-man rotation world, we just don't have enough coverage. Even as we use the Memphis shuttle a bunch, I just don't really know how you're going to get 9 innings 6 days a week. It's just going to be tricky. Whereas if Palante, who's the starter on Friday, Mikolas Saturday, and Libby on Sunday, and Libby's a guy that's gone 6+ twice, so he's been able to give you length. If those guys have a good weekend, I'm not saying they have to win every game, but if those guys have a weekend where they can all go 6 innings or so and show a little proof of concept, that might give enough confidence in the Cardinals to say, all right, we're going to go through with what we said we were going to do with the rotation, and we're going to put Steven Matz back into it. But otherwise, like if you have any one of those guys, Palante gets hit around because of the pitch-to-contact nature, and the Phillies are a good lineup. Mikolas, it wouldn't be hard to envision. Frankly, there could be another path at play here where if Mikolas just gets shelled, maybe you call it. I mean, maybe that early in the season you call it and say, 2 times against good lineups, and if he's not able to give you the length that you need, you don't need a 6-man rotation. You need somebody else in the bullpen, and that guy's taking the Mikolas roster spot. Matz goes into the Mikolas role for the rotation next week. Somebody else comes in, or you honestly, if you didn't want to just completely, and I'm not necessarily suggesting this would work, but if you're not ready to just completely give up on Miles Mikolas, which I'm not sitting here saying the Cardinals shouldn't be considering it because he looked terrible against the Red Sox, and if he looks that way again against Philadelphia on Saturday, it is what it is. You could put him in the bullpen. I mean, it's not glamorous, but neither is a 5.5 ERA or a 10 ERA or whatever he's got right now. You put Mikolas in the bullpen in the Matz spot and say, figure it out. You're going to be mop-up guy for a little bit. We'll hold you back. Not glamorous, but that, I guess, could technically be an option that I hadn't really thought of or considered until now, speaking through it, that you could go with. And that way, if you have a bunch of injuries later on, you've held Mikolas in a less meaningful role, and maybe he's able to pitch through in some lower leverage on some days where he's just in mop-up duty. And that's a way to make it all kind of fit together. I don't know if that's particularly useful. Like, how valuable is Mikolas in a bullpen role? I don't really think his game profiles for it. I think the version of Miles Mikolas that has success in the big leagues is one that is going to pitch to contact, but is going to be in the zone and, be able to mix his pitches enough to, over 6 innings, give up 8 hits, but only allow 2 runs. Like, that's the version of him that you feel good about. I just don't know how that plays in a short burst, because I don't think you're suddenly getting a bunch more velo out of him to say that it's a different look from him in a relief role. So it would really just kind of be mop-up and emergency starter kind of role if they were to do that with Mikolas, and I don't know if it would be something that he would accept if they proposed it. And, I mean, the alternative is he's off the team, right, if you're talking about making a move there. But maybe he says, no, I don't want it to end this way with St. Louis. I want to be able to, try to work my way back into a role that I can earn. If he has that mentality, then maybe a bullpen situation could be an option for him. I'm just speculating, though. Maybe he pitches well against Philly on Saturday and he's in the rotation for a while. And I'm jumping the gun with this conversation. I know a lot of Cardinals fans, though, have been asking for, this to be not only a topic, but something that maybe happens in reality. So I'm laying out my view of how important of a start this could be for Mikolas on Saturday, because if you get a start from Miles where he goes 3 innings and gives up 8 runs, and you're like, well, who's the long relief man? How do we have to rearrange our entire pitching staff to accommodate this? How many times are you going to continue to do that before you go, it's not worth it? We're not gaining anything other than placating a veteran player by doing this. We don't need to do this anymore. So I think it's a pretty important start for Miles Mikolas. I had said this all along, by the way. This is not me changing my tune. I said in spring, you're going to give Miles Mikolas, you're going to give Steven Matz, you're going to give these guys opportunities early in the season, but you're looking very intently to see how it goes. Compared to past seasons when it's just, they've got a contract, they're not going anywhere. No, not anymore. Obviously, Steven Matz had a good spring, but was forced into a bullpen role because of them wanting to get a longer look at Liberatore in a starting role, which I agreed with. But Matz has been serviceable out of the bullpen, at least, if not even better than that. Mikolas had one serviceable start and then a dreadful one. And so having a second dreadful one in a row may just be enough to push the chips to that side of the table where you say, if he can't get outs against good lineups, what are we doing here? If he can, then you say, all right, for those who had declared him dead and buried, maybe not so fast, my friend. But he gets to determine that with his performance, and that's what I love about the game of baseball. At the end of the day, at the end of the season, we're going to know. We get to actually see it play out. So Miles Mikolas gets at least one more chance to see it play out, but if it doesn't go well, then we might know what many Cardinals fans already think they do know about the present and future of his viability in the rotation. So let me know, Cardinals fans, what you think about the Chris Roycroft move. That seems to be officially coming down the pike, that he will be optioned to Memphis, and we'll see who takes his spot. I could speculate on some guesses, but by the time you listen to this podcast, it might already be known information. Like going through the list, Riley O'Brien, interesting potentially. Ryan Ludus is somebody that's down there. Roddery Munoz, technically, but he had like 3 walks in his appearance the other night against, well, I don't know who it was against, but it was for Memphis. So you're not trying to invite more guys that are going to have a bunch of walks. Andre Granillo, interesting, but not on the 40-man roster. There are a number of guys in that bucket, so I'm not sure that I've necessarily just named the guy that it's going to be. Now that I felt like I talked about 4 or 5 different guys, I feel more compelled to pull up the roster and make sure I'm not missing anybody. Like Graceffo obviously could be the answer, but I would expect a different guy for the weekend. And then if you're going to really do the 6-man rotation thing next week, Graceffo's got to be on the team to take the Mats role in long relief. Anybody else that jumps out to me? Matt Swanson, and he is on the 40-man, by the way. It could be Matt Swanson that they call up Thursday or Friday. That's another possibility. So I doubt it's anybody else that's not on the 40-man, and it's probably not Granillo just because I don't think they're going to make a 40-man addition before they have to, and when you've got other guys that are down there that could be candidates, I just don't necessarily think it's Granillo unless they're giving up on somebody like Munoz. So we'll see who it ends up being, but it is time probably to go with the Memphis shuttle and see what that can produce. That's going to do it, though, for this edition of the show. Appreciate you guys, as always, for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.